problem is there's not enough people consuming apples in the country. Most of the apples that you're seeing in a store, no matter whether they come from my farm or anywhere across the country, 99% of the time those have been in storage for probably almost a year before they hit the shelf. We grow about 26 to 2,700 acres of tart Montmorency cherries. We actually grow all of our own trees in our own nursery. An apple tree, you can start to get fruit pretty much on like the third year that they're in the ground.
Welcome to the Ag Creators Podcast, where we help connect consumers to farmers. Today we're talking with Talon Felker, better known online as Pomes and Stones. Talon is a fruit farmer growing apples and cherries, and he's passionate about giving people a look behind the scenes at the challenges and beauty of specialty crop farming. With a young family at home, Talon balances farm life, family life, and his mission to help consumers understand where their food comes from, all while sharing authentic and engaging content on social media. All right, let's jump into this. Talon Felker, welcome to the Ag Creators Podcast. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Talon Felker. I am a cherry and apple grower from northern Michigan, which is quite a bit farther away from where you guys are at, that's for sure. A little bit probably more north than most, but we grow about 26 to 2,700 acres of tart Montmorency cherries in northern, and we have a southern Michigan farm, and then as well as we've just kind of started our own high-density apple farm that we're creeping up on 60 acres, as well as we'll be planting more trees. So we'll be around 70 acres here by the end of like 2026. We are about one of the only last companies that are farm to table. So we're a vertically integrated group of companies where we grow the fruit, we process the fruit, we manufacture and retail. So from the farm all the way to the table, like I mentioned, we kind of have our hands on everything. So it's pretty neat. We have our own co-op, which we market all of our fruit through. And you'll see it in most of the big box stores, and obviously more locally, but Costco, Meijer, Publix, Kroger's, kind of those stores are where you can get most of our products. And most of that goes into dried cherries, juice, and concentrate as our biggest markets.
We take pictures of, more row crop farms. What does it take for the average person? What does it take to grow apples and cherries?
Well, what it takes is a lot of patience and gambling, because it's the tricky part about growing fruit is that it's so vulnerable at all, kind of pretty much at all periods. As soon as the trees begin to grow in the spring, they start taking water into those buds, and then as soon as you get a cold night, that can freeze, and you can lose your entire crop in one night. So that's, kind of more of like a common misconception, I guess, is that people think that fruit just kind of just grows, right? Set it and forget it, but it requires more delicacy. We're in taking care of the leaves, taking care of the fruit, spraying, every week we're doing something. So I think it's a lot more work than most people think.
Yeah, Talon, when you think about fruit and you're in the store picking out the perfect fruit with no blemishes, nothing on it, if there's a little bit of a blemish on an apple or some sorts, is it ruined, or can you still eat it? That's the main misconception.
Right.
Once you say it, would people go into the store? Do they not know if you can pick something that has a little blemish on it?
Yeah, I mean, we would like to think that you would pick something that has, a little touch of a blemish, but obviously no one wants to grab an apple that has a huge bruise on one side, because, when you bite into it, it's going to be soft and mushy, and obviously nobody wants that. So obviously growing good quality fruit and maintaining that throughout the growing season is probably the most challenging aspect of growing fruit, because you could have wind will dent cherries once they get soft enough. If you get too high winds, it'll crush one side of it. Hail can destroy your fruit, and then obviously when you have open wounds on a tissue like that on a fruit, it can spread disease and ruin a whole tree, and it spreads from tree to tree and across your whole orchard if you don't stay on top of it. So it's very delicate, and yeah.
So how did you get into farming? Is it a family thing? Did your parents do it, or did you start out?
I guess I was it's my stepdad's family farm. They have been farming for about 50 years. So I guess for myself, I guess I would be a first generation farmer, because I didn't farm before and none of my family did, but I've been kind of thrown into it now. So it would be a third generation if you look at that lineage. And before I was always just mowing lawns. I was 14 and, my mom said, you're going to have to get a real job. That's not just mowing lawns at your grandparents' house. And the trucks taking the cherry tanks to and from the orchard always drove by, and I always kind of wondered about it. And then it turns out that the guy that my mom ended up getting together with, is his family always owned and ran it. So I kind of jumped in when I was 14, skimming cherry tanks, walking behind the equipment with a tank and skimming leaves and sticks off the top of the water, and just kind of worked my way up slowly from there.
So, Talon, you work on a farm, but now you're posting content about agriculture and about farming. What got you into that?
Well, like I was telling Jack earlier, it was just more of a consistently seeing people online posting content about their farming operation and what they're doing, and it seemed pretty simple. And all the row crop guys have been doing it for such a long time that I thought, I could do something like that. There's not many people that are pushing out and trying to grow, just respect for farmers and agriculture and the specialty crops, especially in Michigan and specifically in cherries, because I know there's some bigger apple growers that are kind of doing the same thing, out west. And I thought, there's not many people advocating for cherries, which have kind of been in a sticky spot in the market the last couple of years with imports and consistently having large crops for the last probably about decade. We've had pretty sizable crops, so obviously that causes its own supply and demand issues. So that was really kind of what it started, and I thought, something that I could do, and so I just kind of I bought a GoPro to start and just hit record, and it's pretty cringy looking at my very first video. I go back and I'm like, man, I can't believe I had 300 people watch that first video after the first 30 seconds, but
Yeah, that's how it happens. That's how it happens for me. That's how it happens for Jack. And pretty much everyone that we talk to that makes content all says the same thing. The very first iteration of it isn't as good as it is now. So it's just getting better and doing it more. And you seem to be enjoying it and doing it a lot more.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of grow on all the platforms. I focused a lot on YouTube to start, and now I'm kind of just trying to post consistently across, all the other three major ones, being obviously Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and trying to just grow as much as I can and share my story and our farm story.
So when you're talking about growing fruit, with row crops, you'll go out and spray and fertilize and you might wide drop corn to put out nutrients. Talk to us about what's involved, from spring to fall with growing fruit, because I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that you have to do.
Yeah, we have I'm kind of really starting to dip my toes into the fertility program and nutrients. As inputs become more expensive, we're trying to focus on keeping a healthier tree by using nutrients, and we're doing sap sampling to kind of see what's happening within the plant in order to get a better grip on instead of just going out and putting out the same fertilizer or the same nutrients across the whole field, it might only need a little bit of this here and there. So we're kind of focused on doing some more things like that and giving the tree what it needs to be healthier in order to protect itself, instead of spending more money on inputs and fertilizers.
So how do you apply fertilizer to a orchard?
We'll do a granular application,
Okay.
just a broadcast, which we have banders, so we focus it to go underneath the rows of the trees instead of wasting it into the grass strip, because obviously we don't need to fertilize the grass. That's a little bit different too, is you plant an orchard and it lasts for 30 years if you take care of the trees. So there's no rotation of the ground. It's the stuff that I'm planting. It'll be my son would, if he's farming when he grows up, he'll be planting the next farm. I'll never see that kind of probably in a new planting in my time. So, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways we can apply. We do 28% nitrogen on the ground in the spring and the fall, as we applied to this tree strip underneath, and then we do urea applications foliarly in the fall as well. And then just a bunch of nutrients at different timings throughout the year. Obviously, bloom, we use a lot of calcium for cell division, cell expansion, and stuff like that. So every different type of the year and every different growing point, different physiological growth stages in the tree require different nutrients at different times. So it's a big kind of step to take and try and pay attention to that. And then when we rolled into apples, there's a lot of that same stuff.
So are cherries and apples similar or pretty different when you're talking about the growing?
I would say they're pretty similar. Apples usually are a touch earlier in the year, so you start taking care of those a little bit sooner. Most of the hardest labor you'll do on cherries is pruning, which obviously a cherry tree is technically a bush. So you have to prune it, otherwise the branches will close itself out and it'll choke itself out essentially. So you prune them. We do about a 3-year rotation. We try to prune about 600 to 700 acres in a rotation to get across everything. And apples are just kind of a little different animal because there's new diseases that they're susceptible to compared to cherries. So it's been a little learning curve to kind of get behind the apple program after growing up in the cherries for so long. But it was good. Diversification is great to have on our farm, and it's good to get a second paycheck instead of just depending on tart cherries
That's right.
in a crazy market. So that's kind of the motivation behind the two crops now.
So let's say you wanted to grow your own apple tree.
Hmm.
How does the process start? When you want to plant a new tree, how long does it start, or how long does it take until you actually have good apple growth? And what does it start as? Do you start as a seed? Do you grow it out and then plant it into the orchard? How does it work?
So what's kind of also a cool thing that we do on our farm that's a little bit different is we actually grow all of our own trees in our own nursery. We have the ability to plant that, and we do drip tape irrigation in with the rootstock. So what we'll buy is rootstock of a different plant, and then we'll obviously plant that into the ground. And as we'll let it grow for a year, and then what we'll do is we'll actually take a bud and graft it. It's a chip bud, and put it into the trunk of that plant we just planted, and that will shoot off a bud that turns into the actual trunk. So we can grow all of these trees for about a third of the cost as it would be for us to buy them from a tree fruit nursery. So and obviously, usually our nurseries are about the 40 to 50,000 tree size. So that adds up pretty quick, and that's just a way that we try and stay, some little bit of sustainability on our farm to save us some money, which it's really not too much work. It's a little labor intensive. There's a lot of trees planted this far away, and you got to take good care of them. You got to pluck the weeds. There's guys crawling on their hands and knees if the weeds get too bad. And so after that, after the trees are ready, we'll rip them up, and then we will transplant them to the farm where they will go. And so an apple tree is much different than a cherry tree. An apple tree, you can start to get fruit pretty much on like the third year that they're in the ground, but that's going to be a touch too early because the branches they don't have the thickness that they need to support the weight of an apple. So you kind of thin the apples off. That's something that's different also from cherries to apples is we chemically thin apple trees. So we're purposely getting rid of fruit, which most people might think you want to keep as much fruit as you possibly can on your tree because that's where your money's at. But apples will go biannual if they overcrop. So it's a huge deal to wait till the apples get to a certain size, and there's a couple chemistries that we use in order to get rid of some of the smaller apples and set a more even crop across the tree. And cherry trees will take 5 to 7 years to get a crop off of. So it's a lot of input and a lot of cost right up front before you even get a small crop off of it.
So when you're talking about chemistries and applying stuff, are you applying stuff via airplane, or would it be like a tractor and a regular?
Yeah, it is a tractor and an air blast sprayer. So pull behind and blast air in the material out onto it.
Just a couple misconceptions that consumers might have. Number one, how long does it take from your farm to a grocery store or where someone can buy apples or buy cherries? How long does that process take?
The cherries get processed pretty quickly. So after they leave the orchard, they're in our receiving facility. We get the weights of the tank to know how much, and we grade them to know, the quality of the fruit. And then they get pitted within 12 to 14 hours immediately after. Then they get put in buckets and individually quick frozen. And those can go into storage, and then we'll kind of use those and take them out to dry the fruit later. So cherries can take a couple years before you actually hit, depending on how much business we have. And apples are now kind of gaining this reputation, especially Honeycrisp, where they're talking about storing apples for over around 8 to 12 months kind of in storage before they hit the shelves. So most of the apples that you're seeing in a store, no matter whether they come from my farm or anywhere across the country, 99% of the time those have been in storage for probably almost a year before they hit the shelf.
So is there anything special for storing them, or how do they keep them good that long? Because normally the produce is only going to stay good for a little while, but a whole year until it gets to the market? Yeah,
so the cherries are obviously frozen, so that's on its own, that's easy. Apples is a little bit different. They use, they call them CA rooms, controlled atmosphere rooms, where they take the oxygen all the way out of the room pretty much, in that way that the apple doesn't mature. And so that's how they can keep the fruit from not wasting, which is, it's pretty crazy science. I think that someone would say, we'll just suck all the oxygen out and the fruit will be good almost a year later, which it still does. It's an impressive thing, and that seems to be the problem, is there's not enough of those, right? there's not enough storage. But I guess if you think that's not really the problem, the problem is there's not enough people consuming apples in the country or buying, fruit from the States. And
It sounds like we need to be more healthy.
that's right. An apple a day keeps a doctor away. So don't be shy.
So your job seems pretty seasonal because in Michigan, obviously, it's not warm year round. It's cold in the winter. So how does seasonally impact kind of what you do on the farm? You talked about some storage stuff, but I don't think you have storage on your farm. Is there things you're doing in the off season, or is it kind of after you harvest, you kind of wait until spring to do a lot with the farm?
Yeah, so it is super seasonal. That's what people call fruit farmers part-time farmers, because we're not out taking care of the cows all year long, or we don't do any livestock or anything like that. So most of the time in the off season is spent on land improvement projects. We plant all of our trees in the fall, so if we're doing any planting, that happens in the fall. And most of it is maintaining and upkeep on equipment, right? So our harvesters cost a lot of money, and on our farm they run about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the last week of June till about the first or second week of August. So our equipment gets a lot of hours really quick. They get ran hard. It's always hot, the hottest time of the year. So a lot of the time is spent maintaining, like I said, equipment, and then also that's when we do all of our pruning, is in the winter. Once the tree shuts down and goes into a dormancy period, which is something that's kind of special to our region. Here in Traverse City is the cherry capital of the world. So, and that's more specific to the 45th parallel, and that's why there's a lot of fruit grown out in Washington area, and then Pennsylvania also has a lot of apples and cherries, and then here in Michigan, it's the cold winters that we need. Fruit trees need they require a certain number of chilling hours throughout the winter in order to kind of reset themselves before they come out of dormancy in the springtime. So it's a unique area. We're right by the Lake Michigan, so the bays keep us warm, which is another huge thing, because the more inland you go, the colder the frost gets. So locally is a huge benefit to us as well.
As you've gone through this, or as you've talked to people that are not in the ag industry, what are some common misconceptions that you've heard about growing fruit or producing fruit?
I would say that if we have a frost event, and because I think we had a crop failure in 2012. And so when that happens, I think people kind of think, oh, well, if there's no cherries, then you guys are just going to poof, you're done. You don't have to do anything. But, obviously as an agronomist, Zach, you know that taking care of your plant doesn't just mean that just because there's no crop on it, that poof, you're done. Because cherry trees, it's not like, corn or, a row crop where you just disc it in or no-till it the next year. You still have to maintain a healthy tree. You can't just let it go. We have to take care of the leaves. We have a really bad an infection called a leaf spot, and it'll take all the leaves off the trees, and then it kind of leaves the tree vulnerable in the springtime. Because of our harsh winters, it can actually kill the tree. So it's like you have to constantly maintain the tree and give it all the nutrients and still do all the same things, just without a paycheck at the end of the year, which is it's a tough pill to swallow when it happens. But I think that's probably the biggest thing that people miss, or that they just think we're done. But
yeah, because if you have a tree go bad, I mean, that's going to cost you a lot more and take 3 to 5 years to even get good fruit out of it again. So really, you're not making any more money, but at least you're not losing the tree and then having to start over and wait a few more years in order to get more fruit out of it.
Yeah. And then, you get to a certain age of the trees too, where if you have a 20-year-old orchard, you're not going to put a brand new tree in it, because by the time that tree hits maturity, that 20-year-old orchard will be ready to be taken out. We just pull the trees out root and stem, and we stack them up, and usually burn them's the best way to take care of them. So yeah, I mean, it's too much if you lose the tree. So it's a lot of maintenance all year long, regardless if you have a crop or not, whether it's a big crop, bumper crop, small crop, medium crop, it's all the same. You still got to grow and maintain healthy trees. And at our scale, it's a lot of trees.
So how does that work at the end of the orchard's lifespan? You go in and take out the trees. Do you wait, and give that land some break, or do you immediately go in and replant once you take the old trees out?
No, we definitely rotate some crop on top of it. We have a couple local row crop guys that will rotate. Obviously, corn. What do? They do corn, sunflowers, and they usually leave it with like an oat, because that leaves the ground pretty smooth, and then we'll usually plant ourselves a little sorghum in the meantime, and then we'll cover it. So yeah, we usually don't replant. It's bad. Trees can be tough on the soil as well. So we don't ever try and plant cherry on top of cherry.
Let's switch gears into harvesting. So we talked a little bit about getting it to the table, getting it into storage, but what about the process of harvesting? Because you want the fruit to be great. You don't want it to be damaged or anything. It's not hard. It's very soft, delicate fruit. How do you harvest those crops?
So cherries, we harvest mechanically using two pieces of equipment that drive side by side. In one machine, I guess I'll use this as an example, one machine goes out and actually grabs the trunk of the tree and will shake it. And then there's tarps on each side, and the cherries kind of roll down onto a conveyor belt, and they go into a fresh water tank. And obviously the tank shows up with fresh water, and the cherries displace the water as it fills, and then we transport them from the field to our receiving facility. So on a heavy crop, it can take a little bit longer to fill a tank. Our cherry tanks are 1,000 pounds a tank. Some years you can get 4 trees to a tank. We call those quarter pounders, because you can get 250 cherries or 250 pounds into one and off of one tree to fill a tank, which is fantastic. And other times it takes longer. You can shake upwards a good crew that working in sync, they can shake up to 18 trees in like a 2-minute period. Given the right conditions and skilled operators, you can cover a lot of ground quickly. So we usually run 3 crews during the day and 3 at night for that 24-hour period that we run. And at our max, we can probably harvest just shy of 1 million pounds in a 24-hour period, which is super crazy, because we can grow annually. Our max so far has been about 24 million pounds, and so we can really produce a lot of fruit really fast, which is super cool for us, because obviously, like I said, we have our own markets to fill, and through our grower co-op that we use. And apples are a little bit different, obviously, because we don't use machines for apples, because like Zach mentioned earlier, you don't want to get one that fell kind of weird and hit some bar on the tarp and put a dent in it. Otherwise, that apple's no good. So all that is done by hand picking, which is just guys out with bags strapped to their chests, and you grab one apple at a time, and you squeeze it too hard, you'll leave dents in the apple, and you got to be super careful. And it's a very skilled job. You might think anyone can go out there and you can be as fast as you want, but you'll damage fruit and lose quality, and then obviously nobody wants to buy that, especially if you're in the fresh market. If you're slicing for juice or applesauce, there's a little more leeway, but they're totally different monsters when it comes to harvest. That's for sure. That is for sure.
It's crazy. There's so much more work going into that. But one thing that you just mentioned, over 20,000 or 20 million pounds of fruit on the farm every year. How many trees does it take to have over 20 million pounds of fruit?
Oh, I couldn't actually tell you how many trees we actually have per acre across the 26 or 2,700. Some of the old orchards have big blank spots in them, and the new orchards are young and don't produce as much. So it's kind of a big scale on where the production kind of comes from. But yeah, it is a whole lot of fruit. We have been over 20 million pounds for the last 3 years, I believe. And we just, this year we're having a little bit of frost damage, so we're probably going to be around 50% or less of a crop, which is going to be a little bit of a change of pace for us. But that's how it goes. That's something that I don't think people quite understand is fruit farmers, it's a big gamble, because you could have great crop all the way up until the day before you start harvest. And then if you have a really windy day, like I said, we've had a storm come through and just break trees over. And you could just lose your whole crop just like that. So it's from every step of the way, from spring frost to bugs that can sting your fruit, and then they just fall off the trees, or you lose your leaves and then your fruit never gets a chance to ripen. And there's just so many factors that go into growing fruit that is so difficult. And that's why I think it's a story to be shared, because there's way more work put into it, I think, than most people think.
So how does it work in the row crop space? You have crop insurance and stuff like that. Is that similar with fruit?
Yes, we do have crop insurance where we can kind of choose. I don't know I believe it's broken down by county and then type. We grow 250 acres of organic tart cherries as well. And so that kind of has its own insurance. So yes, we do use crop insurance, and every time we have a frost, we can make a claim. And it has definitely helped us out in some spots for sure. It's definitely something every farmer should be looking into, no matter what space you're in, like you're saying.
Yeah, and so Talon, since you just mentioned a different type of cherry that you were growing, can you list off all the different types of apples and different types of cherries that you grow and that you are producing in your facility.
Yeah, we grow, and so we're about 98% tart Montmorency cherry. That's the variety of tart cherry we grow. We have there's sweet cherries. We have Cavaliers. We have Lights, Ulsters, Heidelfiggins. There's so many different types of sweet cherries, and those are the kind that you'll eat in your mouth and spit the pit out. Obviously, the tart cherries are the sour ones that you see in your juice, concentrate, dried fruit on your salads, dark chocolate covered cherries, that kind of stuff. Apples, we grow John of Gold's, Premier Honeycrisp, a regular Honeycrisp, Ambrosias, and 2 different varieties of Galas right now.
So for the marketing for all of those, you probably don't pick, oh, this is my favorite apple to eat. This is what I'm going to grow. How do you decide the market for those? Is it just when you're selling stuff like, oh, everyone's buying the Honeycrisp, let's plant more of those trees? Or how do you diversify throughout your crops?
Well, I think most of that kind of comes down to having a good relationship with your processor, right, or your buyer, who's going to be buying your fruit, because they have a grip on the market and what's selling. In cherries, that's our business, but in apples, we sell exclusively, out to other buyers. We don't process any of our own apples, so it's just having a good relationship, with who's buying your fruit, and they can kind of give you kind of a, what they're looking for, right, or what they need. But a Honeycrisp is always a good bet, because obviously that's a little trigger word. Everyone knows a Honeycrisp apple. Everyone likes a Honeycrisp, so it's always good to have some of those on your farm, and those typically can make you the most money. They've been known to get $400 a box for a 20 bushel box. When the price is right, obviously, just like any other commodity.
For sure. The price can go up, it can go down too. It's just
Real quick.
You never know. So since we talked a little bit about all of your farming, what you're doing with the cherries, what you're doing with the apples, what about bees? Because I was looking at your YouTube channel and you got some videos about bees on there. So do you have bees on the same farm as this? And how many bees do you have?
Yeah, we have for forever, even before I always started, we have our own apiary company called Cherry Bee Inc. And so right now, I think we're up to about 14 or 1,500 hives. So we use that for all of our own pollination on our farm. And obviously, coming with that becomes obviously honey production. We can produce around 100,000 pounds of raw honey every year, depending on the year and kind of what the bloom of the natural flowers in the area, as well as the tart cherries do. And so we use that. It's a great relationship to have that kind of thing, because at our amount of acreage, it's impossible to depend on natural pollinators. Some smaller farmers say, oh, you don't need those because you have enough natural pollinators in the area that can take care of your fruit for you. But we just can't leave this kind of volume up to just maybe if there's some in the area type of deal. So we have a beekeeper, and he has one other employee with him, and they maintain all of those hives with just the 2 of them. We also own some land in Florida where we send the bees and they overwinter down there, as well as we also do pollination for oranges in Florida as well, and then we ship them out to California to do almonds. So we rent the bees out before they come to our southern Michigan farm, and then they make their way up to northern Michigan, where we're using to pollinate our trees here.
So you're not having bees to make honey, you're having bees to just pollinate the crop basically, right?
Yeah, the primary function is to pollinate the cherries, and then obviously what he calls a byproduct would be the honey production, which we bottle and sell in local stores, and you can buy barrels of it. A barrel of honey is about 600 to 650 pounds in a 55-gallon barrel of honey, so we'll sell it by the semi-load if somebody wants to buy it.
How much honey are you producing with all of those bees then?
On a good year, we can get right up to about 130, 140 barrels of honey on the best year. And then last year, I think we were around 60 or so that would put you at around around 100,000 pounds. And then I think last year we had a lot of rain, so it was kind of low, and we were in like the 60,000 pound range, which was a bit of a short honey crop for us. But it's a super cool thing, and I only really help out when we take the semis off, when we take the bees off of the semi trucks and we go put them out in the orchards as we prepare for the pollination. Because I don't know if you watched the video or not, but I got stung right below the eye, and my whole side of my head all puffed up, which it usually doesn't. But I wear the full veil, and I got my gloves on, and they're all duct taped, and other people don't. The beekeepers, they don't wear anything. They just have their hands out, and they're crazy. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it.
I'd love to go down to Florida over the winter and then up to Michigan in the summer.
Yeah, it's a lot of road travel though. I don't think people realize how bees move, right? Because you'd think most hobby farms, they just leave them over winter, and they will survive a cold winter if they're healthy enough and they stay tight enough, they stay warm. But we actually put them on semi trucks, and it takes 4 55-foot long flatbeds to move all of our bees. So it's a constant job to put them on and take them off. And obviously, you wouldn't like it if someone picked your house up, shook it, and then dropped it down somewhere multiple times throughout the year. So it's understandable when they come flying out at you butt first, ready to sting you.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to get stung, but if we ever went to your farm, Talon, you know he'd have to put on the bee suit and go tend to the bees.
Yeah, we take the bees are long gone. Once the flowers are gone and the pollination's done, we take them and put them out in bee yards, and we kind of rent land, or we exchange land for honey, and we leave them out. And there's good areas for pollination.
Yeah.
For
Nice.
flowers, and that's where they get their food.
So on the agronomy side, the bees, the cherries, the apples, there's a lot of parts of this. And that's why you like to share your story and make videos and stuff like that. But what about just connecting consumers to the farmers? That's what this podcast is all about, but that's
Right.
what you're doing on your channels. What have you learned from doing this, from sharing your story, from connecting the consumer to you?
Well, I think it's putting kind of matching up a product with a face, right? It's like when you meet someone, you got to put a name to the face. And so when we're asking people to go out there and buy our fruit, and then we put a little story on the back of the bottle of concentrate, but that's not the same as going out and watching something and seeing what people go through on a day-to-day basis, working hard, doing the long hours, taking care of all the crops. And I think just making that connection, because if you can build trust with someone, seeing their face and hearing their story. And I think that, because obviously you wouldn't just buy something without someone's opinion most of the time, right? Because if you can build up that relationship with the consumer, and then they're more likely to follow your story and buy your product. And for me, it's not as much as buying our product, but it's more of buying crops from the United States, right? Because tart cherries have a big problem with imports, because other countries are able to import tart cherry products for less than the cost for us to produce it. So that makes it really difficult for us if people go to the store and theirs is a little bit cheaper. And sometimes that's all that matters to people. They don't, check where it comes from. You look at all the apple bags. It's funny because we'll be picking apples 10 miles from down the road from a store, and people will be buying a bag that comes from South America. And it's, it's tough. And, most people don't check the bag. And so that was my main goal, was to kind of bring awareness to the consumer to look harder at those products and take a peek at where it's being made, because there's no been a better time to show people how the products or fruit crops have been grown, because people are more interested than ever to see where their food's coming from.
It takes is one time for somebody to, for you to pop up on their phone and, they're kind of interested, and then the next time they're at the store, they're like, oh, wait, and then they make the connection.
Yeah. I was really doing a lot of YouTube lives in the fall, and I had a dude on there who came back consistently, and he went to a Costco out in California, and he bought the concentrate, and he drinks it every day now. And the cherries have such a great nutraceutical value to them, because they have high levels of, serotonin? Melatonin? I don't remember. You might want to cut that part out. Whatever it is. And so it helps you sleep. It helps with arthritis. And so there's so many great nutraceutical values to the tart cherry. And I think just getting that awareness out of the health benefits of it can help sell the product, itself too. So there's so much to learn
And that
about
it's grown in the U.S.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of fruit grown in the U.S., and I just think people need to see more about it. And that's
and
the
people
motivation
just,
behind it.
some people just don't know, because if you don't see it on social media, a lot of people aren't going to go out of their way to look up, anything really. If they aren't interested, they're probably not going to find out unless it pops up on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, and then they make the connection.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was an interesting, just another motivational piece for me to start the social media, is that most people, if you start a little small farm and you want people to buy your product, it's more than likely you don't even know where it went after it left your farm, because you don't see any other money or the story post that truck leaving your driveway. But with us, we can, all the way, like I said, from the farm to the table, vertically integrated. It's cool to be able to see a cherry on the shelf and think there's probably a 15 to 25% chance that came from, that came from my farm, during the summer. And our group handles about 20% of the national cherry crop every year. So we don't know, we also process other people's fruit as well, not just ours, because it takes more than what we can produce to fill our markets.
So if someone's going to the store, they got to look at where it's from, make sure it's in the U.S., because there's a lot of fruit being grown in the U.S. and the farmers are putting in a lot of work for it, like you. And they need to know that the fruit's not coming from the store. So there's other things that happen, like a frost could happen and kill your crop. There's less produce in the store. Well, that's not because the store didn't want to buy some. It's because they don't have any, because there's things that happen out there. But it's just checking those. There's other benefits to having fruit that's grown in the U.S. and that U.S. consumers are using. So that's awesome when you can actually see a product being made on your social media, and then you can go to the store and buy it.
Yeah, I think it's the coolest part about it is that I'll go to the store and I'll just walk through the produce section, and then boom, there's our boxes of dried cherries. We have chocolate covered cherries, yogurt covered, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, yogurt, juice, cherry concentrate, dried cherries. It's incredible what we can produce. We don't waste one bit of the fruit. We grind up the skins and put them in once-a-day tablets. And then also, I'm not sure if you guys know anything about like a pellet stove, or you can heat homes with the pits. We bag them up. So we use every bit of the cherry. There's essentially minimal to no waste.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're talking about all these cool things that consumers are curious about. Well, at least I'm a consumer of it and I'm curious about it, but there's a lot of people that don't know where their food comes from. So when you talk about all these different backstories to their food that they're actually eating, it's pretty cool. But when you've been posting on social media, have you had any posts or anything you talk about that's gone particularly viral or done better on social media? Like consumers really concerned about this one thing? Is it bees? Is it cherries, apples? Is there any moments that were like stood out to you where they did really well?
I would say the most popular are the videos that show the actual cherry harvesting, because those videos, people don't ever see those machines. About once a year we go through the local parade and we'll actually drive the machines down the middle of the road, and people are just, you see them, they're pointing, they're staring at it. We've won float of the year because it's just something that people just do not see. Anyone has seen a combine, no matter where you're from. You've seen a picture of a combine. You've seen big tractors, and stuff like that. But nobody sees how cherry harvesters work. People stop and pull over on the side of the road and they stare at us. They get cameras. You even believe that people will walk right into the production zone and try and walk right behind like the harvester, like they own the place. It's crazy. It's crazy, but
They're trying to get those fresh cherries.
yeah, they're trying to just, a couple that don't make it off, they try and pluck them, and we got to tell them, hey, you can't be stealing those. Can't be stealing those. But yeah, I think those videos are very popular. That's some of my most popular content, is the cherry harvesting, as well as, for whatever reason, people love it when stuff breaks. Some of my most popular videos are showing, we had a tractor split apart in our shop because the clutch went bad. It's just, whenever things break, that's what people seem to gravitate to. So I like to show as much stuff that breaks as possible, or stuck in the mud. People love that. I mean, obviously you guys have
Yeah, people
seen
love to
plenty
see
of
you
that.
stuck in the mud.
Yeah, you don't want to see broke things on the farm, but every time I'm just like, pull the camera up and
Get that camera out real quick.
And I just kind of try and hide it. But, for the most part, I've broken everyone in on the farm. There were some skeptical people at first about me stopping for a second to get my camera when something goes wrong type deal. But, I pick my moments. There's times where it's not a good idea to have it out with some certain individuals I work with on the farm. They don't like to be recorded and stuff like that. So, which is a challenge to doing it, because sometimes you want to get a shot, but some people don't want to do it.
Yeah, that's how it goes in content creation sometimes. But you just kind of got to work with it, and you showing as much as you can is really good, and it just shows the side of farming. You're even showing some negative parts of farming, like when things break down and don't go exactly as planned. That always happens in farming. There's always good stuff, and there's always some bad stuff. But wrapping up a little bit, we talk to each person about collaboration. Obviously, we're collaborating right now. But
Right.
If you could collaborate with anyone in agriculture or in social media in general, who would you collaborate with?
I was listening to your guys' episode with Riggs, and he was like, well, I just kind of sent out DMs and they message right back. And it's not, the same. Zach, you were the first one to give me a follow back out of, everybody. When I joined Acres TV, I kind of just, sent some messages out to some people and followed. And you were the first one to follow me back. And obviously, we've been talking a little bit, periodically since then. And so that's really cool. Any opportunity to work with anybody that's interested or wants to talk about growing specialty crops, I would love to chat with them. And, I don't really have one specific person in mind, just anybody that wants to learn more about what I do. And I love learning more about other people's farms and their operations. So I guess, yeah, not specifically one individual that I would be targeting, but.
Yeah.
So if you had to give advice to, a young ag content creator, or even, a young farmer who wants to start doing this, what would your one piece of advice be to somebody who's just starting out?
Right, and I think it's been echoed multiple times here, as Zach said it on the first episode here on this show, and then Riggs said it on week 2, and that would be, you just got to do it. It doesn't matter if it's your iPhone, doesn't matter, like you said, Jack, you don't need a $1,000 camera. You just got to press record, and you just got to not care what people think, right? Some people are going to care about it, and they're gonna want to support you, and other people are going to snicker about it behind your back, maybe. But you just got to have thick skin and not care. And people that care about your content will watch, and you don't feel like you have to shove it down people's throat, and you just kind of stay in your lane and do your thing. And that there's one thing I learned is there's an audience out there. It doesn't matter whether it's ag or you're showing somebody how to do something, you're a mechanic, just doing DIY jobs around the house. There's an audience for anybody. So I think just get yourself recording, talk in the camera. It's going to be awkward. Nobody's going to watch your first videos. You just got to stick to it and stay positive, and it'll change your life. I heard somebody say when I started, you just got to post every day on social media, and things will change. And that's how my life's gone so far ever since I started it too. I was just in a magazine, a national fruit magazine, this month on the cover, and that was not on my bingo card when I started this. So it's super cool to see where it's taken me and the places I'm hoping.
It's super rewarding.
Yeah, I love when I hear people that say, well, I didn't know that's how this was done. That's super cool. I mean, that's a great validation for the work, that any content creator does, right?
Yeah. It's fun when stuff like that, when you get to be out in the front of a magazine, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, Talon? Because you have a family now. And so where do you see yourself going with content creation, with farming, with your family in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it just like, to reference episode 2 again, is Riggs says, you're gonna lose some time doing some things. And just like right now, I'm sure my wife's upstairs sitting on the couch wanting to hang out, but I have to carve some time out to kind of chase this dream and do this kind of stuff. And it's a lot of video editing by myself. I do it all afterward. And so down the road 5 years, I'm hoping that I'm still doing content creation, still feeling motivated, taking things to the next level, and hopefully spending a little less time doing the editing and more time at night hanging out with the family as the kids grow. But one thing that's super awesome is that my wife is a school teacher, so she gets the summer months off when I'm the most busy. So that lends itself greatly to kind of what I do and how it affects the family life, because in the winter, I can take 3 weeks off if I needed to go do whatever, go on vacation. But, it's pretty much an unspoken thing on the farm, just like any other harvest, that, once we hit that middle of June, you're not going anywhere till the end of August type thing. And now we're starting apples, so that's September through, I think our last variety will be ready toward the end of October. So it's added extra time on, and it's great to have a supporting wife that wants to help me and see it succeed as well. And very patient, very patient.
Yeah, farming's busy. It's very seasonal, especially for us where we're not growing stuff year round. It's awesome. It's great to talk to you, Talon.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Talon. I mean, we talk to row crop farmers, and that's neat. I love talking to row crop farmers, but it's cool to hear a different perspective and a different, a specialty crop. You don't hear about growing cherries or apples too often, and so I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me and the opportunity. Obviously, when I saw you guys were doing this, I reached out and I said, hey, I would love to have an opportunity to talk to you guys and kind of share a little bit more about the specialty crops that most people don't think about. So I like a great opportunity. Thanks again for having me. This was a blast, and I'm looking forward to meeting you guys in person
Yeah.
and doing some on-farm visits sometime and shoot some content. So
Yeah.
Yeah, one of these days I want to come up where you are and film that. That'd be neat. That'd be a lot different than
Oh,
filming
yeah.
corn or beans or
yeah,
rice.
it's a totally different perspective, different machines, and like I commented on one of Zach's videos today, I was like, wow, that's cool to have really big tractors, and because our biggest tractor is only like a 150 horsepower tractor. All of our stuff, we have little narrow tractors for fitting down the
Yeah.
rows, and it's just such a different type of farming.
Yeah. Now, one
That's
thing I
right.
forgot though, Talon, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about the specialty crops that you talk?
You can get all of my stuff on every platform: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Poems and Stones. That is where you can find all that stuff.
And we'll link all of your stuff in our bio so if you're listening, you can click on the link and head over to his stuff. But as always, we appreciate y'all listening, and thank you again, Talon. I enjoyed learning a little bit about cherries and apples, and y'all stay tuned. We'll have another episode coming out in 2 weeks.